Hello everyone, João Pereira, and today I'm going to show you guys how I did this effect. Everything procedural, so yeah, the resolution is quite low, so sorry for that. Right, let's see. I have my Houdini scene here, and this is very long, so I will just go through the notes and just follow along. So I have a box. I started with a box. I transformed it here, and then I have another transform which I don't need. This was just if I wanted to create some I'll show you what I mean. If I change this to 0.2, let it cook, as you can see, gives me like more control over the fragments I want to create. I will just leave this at 1. I did a basic Voronoi fracture using a scatter, and I didn't create the name attribute because I was going to create it here, and I called it Tawa, which stands for wood block basically, and another symbol to create the packed geometry. And I didn't create the packed geometry here because I wanted to create a constraint network, and then I created the pivot so then I can oppress my simulation. So yeah, I have my simple Voronoi fracture here, very standard, no constraint network, and then to create the constraint network I used an attribute promote to promote the name attribute, which is Tawa, to a point attribute, and I scattered a lot of points on it, and I connected the adjacent pieces, but I did some tweaks inside it, so I'll show you what I did. Just let it cook. Because it has a lot of points, this will take like 1 minute to cook. I'm just going to skip that, and I will create the connect adjacent pieces and the scatter. I will scatter. Yeah, this is good. Connect the adjacent pieces, and by default this comes like this. I will just paste the same value here. As you can see, no points. And to change this, I edit the contents. I deleted everything from the switch up, so this part, just press delete. And I don't have enough points, so one more 0 should be enough. Nope, still not enough. I will see the result here. I'm just going to let it cook because it needs a lot of points for this small distance. Let's see, it shouldn't take that long, maybe 30 seconds. Alright, as you can see, it creates these lines. They are not points, they are lines. And these are my constraints to hold the geometry together. And I made sure to create the length attribute. This is important. So if you give it one more 0 here, it should be enough. I have 4,000 points, and I scattered this amount. And then use a primitive swap, and this comes by default. And all I did is do transformation and scale them to 0, so they are smaller and close to each other, like points. And then I create my constraint. This is very basic, so my constraint name, which doesn't matter in the name, I called it hard, and the constraint type matters, and all means all constraint types. Glue, spring, and another one which I don't remember. And lastly, I have my box again. I transformed it here and here, and then I merge it, and I have two boxes. Another transform if I needed more control over the two, and then assemble. This time I don't need the name attribute because this is just the static geometry, and I create the back geometry, made a note to reference. So then I have my rigid body simulation. As you can see, it's cooking right now. I have it cached, but yeah, just play the cache. As you can see, I will dive inside the rigid body sim so you can see it. Frame 38 should be enough, and I will make sure, yep, so it doesn't cook. I have this here, and this is my rigid body simulation. Pretty easy. So I have a ground plane, this one, and I have a merge, so I can bring in my gravity force standard and my constraint network. So in my constraint network, I just reference the outcon, which is this one, and the data name, which is art, which is the name I wrote here. It has to be the same name. And I have a subsolver, which I will explain in a minute. After that, I need to input my objects to be processed, which is the bullet solver. I didn't change any values here. And then I have my collision geometry, which is these blocks, and I increase the density. And I also have my dynamic objects. So on my dynamic objects, create active objects has to be on, and on these static objects, so they don't fall. And on my subsolver, if I didn't have this, let's see how it would look. I still have my constraint network holding them, but it would look like that, like jelly, I don't know, but the constraints wouldn't break. And with the subsolver, it's gonna take a little more to calculate, but as you can see, they break. And to do this, I create a subsolver, and by default, the subsolver has all this. I just deleted this and keep the relationship geometry. And all I did was create an attribute angle, and if the angle was above this 0.2, then the constraint would break, and if the torque was above 150, the constraint would also break. So I have my geometry spreadsheet, I believe. Yeah, if I come here, geometry spreadsheet, relationship, constraint network, geometry. Not here. This is because also the rest length, as you can see, it's 1, but we created this attribute here. Make sure if it is 1, it would collapse because it's 1 meter, the constraint. I'm trying to find, alright, it's here. On bullet, constraint network, relationship constraint, our constraint and geometry primitive. As you can see, we have torque here, and if I move this here. Alright, as you can see, when the torque is really low, but when it touches here, the torque is really high. So I wanted, if the torque was above 150, it will break the constraint. And if the angle, I don't think the angle it's here. Yeah, it's here. If the angle was above 0.2, it goes from 0 to 1, it would also break. So you can mess with these values here. It's up to you. You can even add if at time is above, if this frame is above 36, for example, it would remove all constraints. So if this happens, you can copy it. After frame 36, it would all fall apart. You can use other values instead of torque. You can use force, for example, distance. It's up to you. And that's it for the rigid body. So next, I file cached it. I also bring everything, the boxes and the fracture, and I cached it out, and then I did a press, because as you can see, it gives more detail on the inside faces, and this is without detail. And to do this, I did the same scatter, but this time I came here. As you can see, it's very slow already, because I didn't want to simulate with all this geometry. Right. As you can see, it's really slow to cook one frame already. And since I stored the pivot attribute, I could then transform the pieces to their IRES. I'm just gonna cancel, and it's exactly the same, but on the interior detail, I add interior detail and mess with these values. You can see the exploded view. I will just increase this to 0.03 so it's quicker, hopefully. This node is very useful, the exploded view one, as you can see. Gives you really nice control to see how your fracture is going to look. So I will just set this one, and you can see the interior detail on the faces. Then I reference it again, and I create the transform pieces node. And this basically transforms the low res geometry and to the high res one. And on this one, I made sure to create the name attribute, which is double, the same as this one. So then I transform the pieces. I remove all attributes because I didn't need all of this. I just needed the position. I cached it out, as you can see. It's really slow reading from the disk already because it does a lot of geometry, polygons. And after that, I did a facet to compute the normals, add the material, reference it, and merge it to the render. Next thing I did was create the small debris. So if you come here, you can see small debris. So to do this, I unpacked the geometry because it was packed. As you can see, one packed geometry. I needed to unpack this. Oops. Alright. I removed all attributes, including velocity, because I was going to compute it again. As you can see, the trails, the geometry. And then I added the debris source node. and this basically creates debris or generates points when the surface breaks. So as you can see, creates points. And afterward I also changed the lifespan to 0.5. I created the debris sim, and I don't think I need this one, but doesn't matter. I created the debris sim using rigid bodies shelf tool debris, and I didn't change anything here, just the constant activation to only emit on from frame 21 to frame 55, and yeah, I then cached it out again. Oh, this is reversed, alright. This is here, and this is here. Alright, if you can note this, you can see the particles only emit on the frames I set. And I messed up with some of the friction bounce on the particles to give the look I wanted. I then imported them and cached it out. And at this point, these are just points and not geometry. And to create the geometry, all I did was create a wrangle and made an attribute called max index. And then from the max index, I created a debris index, which is a random number times this value, which it doesn't matter. You can type whatever you want here, whatever value you want. And this basically, let me change this to geometry spreadsheet. And this basically gives a random number for each point and doesn't change. So each point has a random number. And then I create a copy sub. And on the copy, I created, I didn't transform using template point attributes, because if you use that, some points will get above or under the ground. So make sure this is off. And on this, I created also two stamps, stamp inputs, and the attribute to stamp was the debris index and some scale. I just called it S and random PT, which is fine. So then I because I wanted to be all procedural, I bring out my pieces and I blast them according to, because each piece has a name. So if you put down a blast, which is like a delete sub, you can see each piece has a name from 0 to whatever value, how many pieces you have. So Houdini crashed because I have a lot of pieces. So come here, maybe Tower 15, non-selected, and you can see this one. If I change this to 16, a different, and 200, sorry, another one, 1000. We don't have that, but as you can see, each time you write the number here, it gives me a random piece. So because I created this index, so random number, I then created a name, Tower, and instead of randomizing here the points, I created the stamp function, which stamp copy debris index, and the default value is 0. It doesn't matter what value you put here. I then did a transform because each piece is very large, then I need to scale them down, as you can see. And I also used my S stamping and fit 0.1 because I wanted to fit my scale from 0.02 to 0.12 randomly. So fit 0.1 stamp, copy, my attribute to stamp is S, and the default this again doesn't matter what value you put here. So then I cached it out because I have a lot of geometry here. Yeah. Then I added the material again, reference it, and merge it with the original geometry. Let's see. As you can see. Okay. Next thing was create a smoke. So I have my debris here. I will turn off here. I have my debris. I then created the density attribute, so I used a VOP for this. You can use a wrangle, but just to be different. I grabbed my age. The age goes from zero when the particle is born to whatever value. So if I isolate idle attributes and keep age, you can see when a particle is born, it starts at 0 and goes up and up and up and up and up. So I wanted my density to start at 1 instead of 0 when the particle is born, and then go from 1 to 0. But since this goes from 0 to whatever value, I bring my age and I divide it by my lifespan. So my lifespan, I reference the value I have here, 0.5. And if I visualize my density, it's here. And if I unplug this, you can see my density starts at 0.0 and goes to whatever value. And I wanted it to go from 0 to 1, so I did a fit range. And this comes by default, 0, 1. And I wanted to start at 1 and end at 0, so now my density starts at 1 and goes down to 0. Alright, that's my density. And I did a curl noise to the velocity, because if you look at the velocity now, it looks like this. And I wanted to add some curl noise, so you can see now. It's again another attribute VOP, and all I did was grab a turbulent noise, plug that into the position, and multiply it by the existing velocity. So now you can mess with this, just to add some variety to the velocity. I also created a p-scale attribute for the density. We will also need that, so wrangle, it's easier, p-scale equals density. So my geometry spreadsheet, my p-scale will always be like my density, but then I don't want to have a p-scale of 1, so this is the same as at p-scale times 0.07. It's the same as writing this. Alright, so my p-scale is lower and goes down to 0 as well. So then I create a fluid source, this one, and this is very slow, so I also cached it out. I have my visualizers on for some reason. Visualization. This is so I can watch the velocity fields, but it doesn't matter. Sorry, I left something on the ground. So I have my density, which is this one we created. So it grabs the density attribute, and when it's almost 0, it has no effect, as you can see. And this is basically the defaults. You can mess with the division size to have more detail, and I made sure the noise was on, because without noise you have a lot of density. So let me show you. With noise, without noise, as you can see. And you can also go to the kernel noise and add kernel noise if you want. But since I add the kernel noise, the turbulent noise, whatever here, didn't matter. I cached that out, of course. It has the color attribute, so you will see the visualizers for the velocity, and I reference without density, no. This is my smoke sim, so let's dive it. Alright, this is more complex than the rigid body or the pop sim, but straightforward. I ground plane gravity, merge the two with mutual, and then I have a pirate solver and my smoke object. 0.05 was the resolution I used, and I can see the box. Alright, whatever. Alright, I can see it now. Yeah. 0.05, which is fine, and increase the size 20, 10, 20, and the center. I did this value divided by I got this one, 0.5. So it's always half of this value. So next thing, on my sourcing, I bring out the source volume and I bring out my density, and I changed the initialized source smoke, and I didn't use temperature. I set this to none, and the velocity I set it to half. And on the mask, I masked the density, so it only affects the density, and that's it. You can scale the velocity if you want, but it doesn't matter. Then I have a collision. So because I wanted the smoke to interact with my rigid body, I had to, let's come here. I have my simulation here. As you can see, and I trail the velocity because we deleted the attributes. I had to compute the velocity again. I did a VDB. This is very slow, so I'm just gonna skip it. I did a VDB, and the distance VDB is called collision, and I created an attribute. Very slow. Okay. It took like 10 seconds, but if you use the source volume, fluid source, sorry, and use this as collision, sorry, you can see this is going to take like 1 minute to compute a low res volume. So VDVs are just way faster. As you can see, it took like 10 seconds or 15 seconds and gave me this crappy result. So VDBs are way faster and give you better results. So this is the VDB in 10 seconds, already really high detail. I filled the interior and created an attribute. The attribute was point V, the velocity. And the VDB name, I called it collision vel, because you need to link these names and the vector type to velocity. You need to link these names to the DOP network. Yeah, so I'm just going to delete this one, as you can see. Just gonna calculate. Alright. And fill interior was on. I didn't need anything, so I converted to a VDB, could convert to volume with a convert VDB SOP. So this is a VDB volume, so I need to convert this to a Houdini volume, so I use this. As you can see, X, Y, Z, and this is just one. So I cached it out and referenced. So then I come to my smoke sim and I bring another source volume, merge the two, and this time I initialize collision. And on the scale source volume, because it's a VDB, this is by default comes like 1, I think. So I changed this value to -1. Next, as you can see, if you go to the sub to dot bindings, you can name whatever you want your VDBs, but you need to make sure that this matches. So the velocity, I created this called collision val on the VDB, so collision vals for the velocity, and the source volume collision. You can change the name, but you need to change the name here. Okay. Next, I have a gas resized fluid dynamic, because if you're going to simulate a 20 by 10 by 20 box, it's going to take a lot of time. So it's like an adaptive grid, and I track the density. Next, I needed to add some turbulence and some curl to the smoke, so I add a merge, and I bring a turbulence, gas turbulence, and just mess with it a little bit. Gas disturbance, block size 0.3 and 0.1 on disturbance, and the second one with smaller block size and higher disturbance, and then even smaller block size and higher disturbance. And on the power solver, I added the dissipation. I could add the gas dissipate here. It's the same thing, but whatever. 0.1 on this dissipation, and that's it, I think. I increased a little bit the viscosity and the buoyancy lift, so it doesn't stay on the ground, and the time scale, it's fine. Now you just mess with these values and get the value you want. I come to the vests and increase the max of steps to 2, because it's so fast you can infinitely increase it more. And on the advection, make sure this is by default, and I changed it to this, because if you have a really fast fluid, this advection type gives you sharper results, better results. It's slower to compute, but it's better. If you want some more slow motion like, use this one. And I changed one more thing. I'm trying alright, on the relationships, I extrapolate into collisions on and correct collisions off. Correct collisions is if the fluid is inside the volume, the volume you created here for the collision, it's going to be deleted. So yeah, I turn that off, and extrapolate into collisions is going to give you a better result, put it that way. So that's all I did, I think. And at this point you just mess with this, and I dope IO to import the smoke. I delete some attributes and cached it out, as you can see. And I added a material, which is the billowy smoke preset, and I just changed some smoke. I just changed some settings. I didn't do noise. The temperature field is the density. I changed the smoke color, and that's all. So, and I referenced the smoke. So I didn't merge the smoke with this, because I wanted to have a separate pass. So this is a render, just a geometry, and I created another geometry node, and bring in the smoke, just the smoke. Alright, I added some lights, a grid for the ground, skylight, a camera, and I rendered this out. So this was my workflow for this shot. Thank you guys for watching. See you next time.